Beneath the sands of Egypt lie 25 granite containers, each weighing 100 tons. Not a single engineer in the world can explain how they were made. In India, there stands an iron pillar that has not rusted for 16 centuries, while modern steel succumbs in just a few years. In Iraq, a battery was found that was assembled 2,000 years before Volta introduced his own. These objects don't fit into the textbooks because the textbooks were written by people who never saw them. Today, we will examine 7 real ancient discoveries, each of which looks as if it was left behind by travelers from the future. And we'll start with the heaviest mystery, literally. All 7 objects can be touched with your own hands. Each one is kept in a real museum, and each one breaks the conventional view of the past. Egypt, Saqqara, 1850 AD. The French archaeologist Auguste Mariette noticed a stone sphinx sticking out of the sand to the northwest of the Pyramid of Djoser. After excavating an entire avenue of such sphinxes, he realized that they led to the entrance of an underground structure. When his team broke inside, they had to use dynamite because the passages were completely sealed. Behind the stone walls, a labyrinth of long tunnels carved directly into the limestone was revealed. In the largest gallery on both sides of the corridor stood 25 giant boxes made of black and pink granite. Each box is 4 meters long, 2.5 meters wide, and 3.25 meters high. The lid alone weighs 30 tons, and the total mass of the container approaches 100 tons. That is the weight of a fully loaded railway car hidden in a cramped underground niche. When Mariette opened one of the boxes using explosives, there was nothing inside except emptiness and smooth walls. Official science calls this place the Serapeum and claims that sacred Apis bulls were buried here. The problem is that in none of the open boxes were any remains of bulls or traces of mummification found. But they did find something more frightening than mummies: the inhuman precision of stonework. Engineer Christopher Dunn, who worked for 49 years in high-tech manufacturing, measured the interior surfaces of 2 of the boxes. He used an industrial gauge with a tolerance of 2 10,000ths of an inch. The walls turned out to be flat to a degree that can only be achieved with computer-controlled machines. The corners are precisely 90 degrees, and the radius in the corners is only 4 millimeters. When Dunn approached an American company with a request to replicate such a box from a single piece of granite, they replied bluntly, even with an unlimited budget, it would have to be assembled from 6 separate slabs. But the ancient craftsmen carved each container from a single monolith quarried in Aswan, 800 kilometers from Saqqara. The stone of most of the boxes has a hardness of 6.5 on the Mohs scale, and some are made of diorite, which is even harder. The tunnels are so narrow that 2 people can barely pass each other inside them. How 100-ton blocks were turned at right angles in the corridors and lowered into niches with a gap of just 40 centimeters is something science cannot explain. There is simply no space there to place levers or a team of workers, and officially the ancient Egyptians did not have hydraulics. One unfinished box still stands in the middle of the tunnel as if the builders abandoned it halfway and left forever. The crudely scratched hieroglyphs on the outer walls sharply contrast with the mirror-like polish inside, as if the inscriptions were made by completely different people thousands of years after the containers themselves were created. If you feel that regular channels tell the story too superficially, subscribe. Here we dig where the textbooks stop. What do you think? Why would surgical precision be needed for a bull's sarcophagus? Share your opinion in the comments. Let's move from the underground galleries of Egypt to the seabed of the Mediterranean Sea. In 1901, Greek sponge divers were caught in a storm near the island of Antikythera. The captain sent a diver down so as not to waste time, and he surfaced in a panic. He was shouting about dead bodies at a depth of 60 meters. The captain went down himself and saw not a cemetery, but the remains of an ancient Roman ship that sank around 85 BC. The dead bodies turned out to be marble statues that had lain in the sand for 2,000 years. Among the sculptures and scattered coins lay an unremarkable piece of greenish bronze. For 2 years, it gathered dust in a box at the National Museum in Athens until the politician Spiridon Stais noticed a crack. Inside, a gear gleamed, small and perfectly cut. In an object over 2,000 years old, newspapers wrote about a sensation. Skeptics cried forgery, but a 2000s-era X-ray tomograph put everything in its place. Inside was hidden a system of 37 bronze gears, the largest measuring 13 centimeters in diameter with 223 teeth. A device the size of a laptop calculated the positions of the Sun, the Moon, and 5 planets. It predicted solar and lunar eclipses, tracked the cycles of the Olympic Games, and displayed the phases of the Moon. European science only achieved such calculation accuracy 1,500 years later. The mechanism took into account that the Moon speeds up and slows down at different points of its elliptical orbit. To achieve this, there were 2 gears inside mounted with an offset axis, essentially a differential. The very same mechanism that allows your car's wheels to rotate at different speeds when turning. The teeth of each wheel are cut with a precision unattainable by hand filing. The triangular teeth are identical, as if stamped. The inscriptions on the back panel, recently read thanks to tomography, turned out to be a detailed operating manual. The lost pointers on the front panel carried colored bolts, fiery red for Mars, golden for the Sun. Researchers from University College London called the original a work of genius, combining Babylonian astronomy and the mathematics of Plato's Academy. Whoever assembled this device understood the cosmos at a level that the rest of humanity would not reach for another 20 centuries. The Roman orator Cicero in the 1st century BC described a similar device created by Archimedes in Syracuse. This means that the Antikythera mechanism was not unique. It belonged to an entire tradition, of which only a single example has survived to our time. The Greeks packed the heavens into a bronze box, while Indian blacksmiths around the same era tamed iron. In the courtyard of the Quwwatul Islam Mosque in Delhi stands a column 7 meters and 20 centimeters tall, weighing more than 6 tons. An inscription in Sanskrit links it to King Chandragupta II of the Gupta dynasty, 4th century AD. For 16 centuries, the column has stood under the open sky, exposed to monsoon rains and scorching heat, and yet it shows almost no rust. Ordinary iron in Delhi's climate becomes encrusted with rust in just a few years, while the Eiffel Tower has to be repainted every 7 years. In the 18th century, a cannonball struck the column, but it withstood the impact, leaving only a dent at a height of 4 meters. Scientists have been trying to solve the mystery since 1912, when British chemists first took samples. The answer appeared 91 years later, when Professor Balakrishnaman from the Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur published his research. His team used X-ray diffraction, electrochemical tests, and microscopy to finally understand what was happening on the surface of the metal. The iron of the column contains about 1% phosphorus, while it has almost no sulfur or magnesium. This composition triggers the formation of a layer of crystalline iron phosphate, just 1/20th of a millimeter thick. This layer acts as an invisible shield that heals cracks on its own with every cycle of wetting and drying. Essentially, ancient blacksmiths created a natural analog of stainless steel 15 centuries before stainless steel was invented. They used forge welding, heating, and hammering the iron in such a way as to preserve the phosphorus, without instruments and without textbooks. Modern metallurgy has still not reproduced the exact combination of composition and durability found in this column. 6 tons of iron without a single gram of paint stand in the open air and win a battle that our entire industry is losing. And which country are you from? Write it in the comments. It's interesting to know where our viewers are watching from. The Indians mastered iron, and the Romans in the 4th century mastered light. In the British Museum, behind armored glass, stands the Lycurgus cup, the only intact example of dichroic glass from antiquity. If light falls on it from the front, the cup is green like jade, but if it passes through the wall from behind, it flares up ruby red. A scene from myth is carved on its surface. King Lycurgus is entangled in grapevines while the god Dionysus watches his demise. The carving is done using the cage cup technique, where glass is cast as a thick block and then cut down to a delicate lattice. But the trick with the color change is hidden not in the carving, but in the very structure of the glass itself. The mystery was solved in the 1990s when fragments of similar Roman glass were examined under an electron microscope. Inside, they found particles of a gold and silver alloy about 50 nanometers in size, 1,000 times smaller than a grain of salt. When light touches these inclusions, the electrons in the metal begin to oscillate and change the wavelength. Silver is responsible for the green color in reflection, while gold produces the red color when light passes through. This effect is called plasmon resonance, and today it is used in sensors and holographic technologies. Roman craftsmen ground gold and silver down to particles invisible to the eye and fused them into glass in a ratio of 7:3. Scientists from Cambridge were only able to reproduce a similar effect in 2014, creating arrays of 16 million nanoparticles per millimeter. The Romans achieved the same thing 16 centuries ago without microscopes, without lasers, without textbooks on optics. The secret of its production died with the empire, and the Lycurgus cup remained the only complete witness. Today, researchers are trying to use this ancient principle to create ultra-sensitive water pollution detectors. A technology born for the banquet table may save millions of lives 17 centuries after its invention. The Romans mastered light, while their contemporaries in the East may have mastered electricity. In 1936, during the construction of a railway near Baghdad, workers uncovered an ancient burial site. It was located not far from the ruins of Ctesiphon, the capital of the Parthian Empire. Among the finds was a 14-centimeter tall clay jar with a copper cylinder inside. Suspended in the center of the cylinder was an iron rod that did not touch the sides, and the neck was sealed with a bitumen stopper. Wilhelm König, the director of the National Museum of Iraq, immediately recognized the construction of a galvanic cell. Two metals with different electrochemical potentials separated by a space for a liquid electrolyte. Traces of corrosion on the walls indicated the presence of acid, most likely vinegar or grape juice. The American scientist Willard Gray built an exact replica and filled it with grape juice, and the device actually produced an electric current. Such a device is capable of generating about 1 volt, and several connected jars would provide enough current for gilding jewelry. Similar vessels were found in the neighboring Seleucia, and bronze and iron needles were discovered next to them. The Roman physician Scribonius Largus in the 1st century described treating gout with an electric ray applied to the patient's feet. The idea of using electricity in medicine was familiar to the ancient world long before science gave it a name. The Baghdad Battery predates the official invention of the voltaic pile by at least 16 centuries. In 2003, it was stolen from the museum during the invasion of Iraq, and its fate remains unknown. We have lost what may be the oldest electrical device in history and can't even conduct a modern analysis. Let's return to Egypt, but this time to an object that fits on a dining table and looks like a part from a machine shop. In that same year, 1936, archaeologist Walter Emery opened the tomb of the official Sabu in the Saqqara necropolis. Next to the skeleton lay a broken stone disc with a diameter of 61 centimeters. It is carved from metasiltite, a brittle rock that splits at the slightest careless blow. 3 curved blades converge at a central hub, and from above the disc is indistinguishable from the impeller of an industrial pump. The tomb is about 5,000 years old, the first dynasty when tools were made of stone and soft copper. No one can explain how, from a rock that crumbles at the slightest touch, they carved thin blades without a single chip. An enthusiast printed a copy on a 3D printer and placed it in a housing with a shaft. When rotated, the copy began to powerfully pump water, working like a classic centrifugal impeller. Without the housing, the spinning disc created a stable water vortex so strong that the similarity in shape cannot be a coincidence. Engineers at Airbus also printed copies and confirmed its aerodynamic properties. Although the disc cannot serve as a propeller, Egyptologist Cyril Aldred noted that the shape of the disc suggests it is a copy of a much older metal original. If the Saqqara disk is indeed a model of a lost mechanism, then we are looking at evidence of engineering thought that disappeared before recorded history began. 5,000 years ago, someone in the Nile Valley knew how to pump water using centrifugal force. And then this knowledge vanished into the sands, along with the name of the one who invented it. The latest discovery is not hidden underground, but stands before thousands of tourists every day near Xi'an, China. In 1974, farmers digging a well stumbled upon fragments of a clay figure. This was the beginning of the discovery of the terracotta army. More than 8,000 life-sized warriors made of fired clay. Each figure is human-sized. Not a single face is repeated, even though only 8 basic molds were used for the heads. They guarded the tomb of the first emperor of unified China, Qin Shi Huang, for the construction of which 700,000 workers were mobilized. To this day, less than 1% of the complex has been excavated, but the real sensation was not the statues, but their weapons. More than 40,000 bronze arrowheads, swords up to 95 centimeters long, spears and crossbow mechanisms were recovered from the pits. After 2,200 years underground, the blades gleamed as if they had been forged yesterday, and the edges remained sharp. For 40 years, scientists believed that the secret was in the chromium coating, since traces of chromium were found on the bronze. Chromium plating was only patented in Europe in the 20th century, so the discovery seemed incredible. A joint study by University College London and the Museum of the Terracotta Army in 2019 overturned the theory. The chromium on the swords turned out to be contamination from the lacquer used to coat the wooden handles and bamboo shafts. It had nothing to do with the preservation of the bronze itself. The real secret lay in the composition of the bronze, which had a high tin content, and in the properties of the local soil. The alkaline loess of Xi'an, with its fine particles and low organic content, created the perfect environment for preserving metal. Bronze replicas buried in the local soil remained untouched after 4 months of extreme testing. The same samples buried in British soil over the same period became heavily corroded. 22 centuries ago, the craftsmen of the Qin dynasty selected an alloy and an environment that worked as the perfect preservative. They didn't know the words electrochemistry or alkaline corrosion, but the results of their work have outlasted all the empires that came after them. 40,000 blades lay in the darkness waiting for their time like an order that was never revoked. What surprised you the most from what you heard today? Write your answer in the comments. We have traveled through the underground labyrinths of Egypt and descended to the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, stood by the Iron Pillar in Delhi, and peered inside a Roman cup where nanoparticles dance. We held in our hands a battery that is 2,000 years old and spun a stone turbine that is 5,000 years old. Each of these discoveries is real, documented, and kept in a museum that you can visit tomorrow. You don't have to take them on faith. All you need to do is buy a plane ticket, go inside, and see them with your own eyes. None of them require aliens to explain, but each one forces us to admit an inconvenient fact. Our ancestors possessed knowledge that we are rediscovering thousands of years later. We call these breakthroughs, but they may have simply called them ordinary craftsmanship. Progress may not be a straight line upward, but a spiral where each turn begins with the same ignorance. The real mystery is not how they did it, but why we forgot it.